Welcome to the Three Martini Lunch. Grab a stool next to Greg Columbus of Radio America and Jim Garrity of National Review. Three Martinis coming up.
Hey, really glad you're with us for the Thursday edition of the Three Martini Lunch. We've got good and two crazy martinis today for you. First, a quick heads up that tomorrow we will have a special edition of the Three Martini Lunch. We will be taking a look at some of the most underreported or undercovered stories, basically stories that should be getting a lot more attention, but don't. And the media may have a variety of reasons for doing that, partisan among them, but we'll be looking at things overseas. We'll be looking at things at home, economics, foreign policy, a lot of different stuff. So be sure to join us for that tomorrow. But for today, it really could be three crazies if you think about it, because academic administrators actually got it right at Columbia University yesterday. It didn't look like it at first, but the pro-Hamas crowd, they love doing this in late April, early May. We should probably dig into that a little bit. But nonetheless, they went wild again at Columbia's campus. They decided to occupy the Butler Library. Finals are about to start, I think, tomorrow at Columbia. So a lot of kids were in there studying. These kids didn't care. These protesters, they decided to occupy it. They decided that they were going to take it over and rename it the Basel al-Araj Popular University. Jim explains why they did that and why they're wrong in the Morning Jolt. He may do it again here on the podcast in just a moment. Ultimately, it looked like the security forces at Columbia University were just going to back down. Ultimately, that was not the case. The acting Columbia president, Claire Shipman, former longtime journalist with ABC News, says that in a statement yesterday that these students were absolutely wrong. They completely got out of hand and things had to be done.
Earlier today, a group of protesters occupied one of the main reading rooms in Butler Library, refusing to leave, and another group breached the front door, causing substantial chaos. All of this as the bulk of our students are working hard to prepare for exams. These actions not only represented a violation of university policies, but they also posed a serious risk to our students and campus safety. We had no choice but to ask for the assistance of the NYPD, and I'm grateful for their help and professionalism, as well as that of our public safety team. Let me be clear. What happened today, what I witnessed, was utterly unacceptable.
So the smart tactic that happened then was that they forced the occupiers to stay in the library, and the only way they could get out was to show their ID, possibly to prove that they're actually students at Columbia, but also potentially to get their names, because Marco Rubio says he's going to check these people for visa violations now. But then Claire Shipman, the acting president, went in and saw what those occupiers had done to the library.
As I left hours later, I walked through the reading room, one of the many jewels of Butler Library, and I saw it defaced and damaged in disturbing ways and with disturbing slogans. Violence and vandalism, hijacking a library, none of that has any place on our campus. These aren't Columbia's values. Let me be clear. Columbia unequivocally rejects anti-Semitism and all other forms of harassment and discrimination.
Jim, as an aside, I would like to place a moratorium on the phrase, "let me be clear," for at least 5 years. But other than that, the ultimate response here by the university, by the NYPD, was quite good.
I was going to say, I hear Obama. Nope, let me be clear. This is a mostly good martini. I think we could argue about whether the crowd should have been allowed to occupy the library for 4 hours. And when you mentioned the timing of this, Greg, I question the timing, as the conspiracy theorists traditionally say. I'm like, you idiots, don't you understand? You're 2 days away from exams. People need to study. And then all of a sudden dawned on me as you're giving that description there, Greg, maybe it's deliberate, and maybe some of these are participants like, oh man, I did not study for that exam. There's no way I'm going to be ready on Friday. Hey, what if we shut down the library because it's giant hullabaloo? Do you think they'll delay exams? Do you think maybe we get an extension? I'm not saying it would be right. I'm just saying that is a motivation that I would relate to. By the way, the other thing is that in addition to making, I think, pretty much the right decisions, if maybe a little bit slower than I would have liked to see, Claire Shipman makes for a much more effective spokesman for Columbia University than almost any other university president I've seen. That television experience comes through. And somebody made the observation, like, you watch her 5-minute video that she put out in the aftermath of all this, she speaks like a human being. There is no hiding behind lawyers. There is no, legalese. She speaks like a person who's actually, so kudos to her for this. As for Basel al-Araj, so Time magazine described him as, quote, a Palestinian activist and writer who died in 2017. Fact check, technically true, but that leaves out a lot of the rest of the story. 2017, he was killed in a raid involved the Israeli Defense Forces and the Border Police's counterterrorism unit. They surrounded an apartment building where the suspect, the then 31-year-old Basel al-Araj, was staying. Video footage released by the IDF shows security forces entering an apartment and finding the suspect hiding in a small hallway storage space above a doorway. Police spokesman charged that when Araj saw them, he opened fire with a Carlo submachine gun. Security forces fired back, killing Araj, a pharmacist from the village of Al-Walaja near Bethlehem. Now, the Palestinians said there was a 2-hour gun battle, and they ran out of ammunition, and that's when they killed him dead. There's also separate reports that said it was an M16 rifle. The Israelis said Araj was, quote, the head of a terrorist cell that planned to carry out attacks against Israeli targets, and that he had purchased the weapons. So he's the kind of activist and writer who buys weapons and plans terrorist attacks and dies firing a rifle at the IDF. But he did do some writing. And one of the writings he did was like 8 rules for guerrilla warfare. I tell you, Greg, everybody's doing listicles these days, even Palestinian terrorists. And he says, quote, today's wars are no longer just wars and clashes between armies, but rather are struggles between societies. Let us be like a solid structure and play a game of biting fingers with the enemy, our society against their society. Greg, I'm going to hope that something's getting lost in translation there. I don't want to know what he does with fingers and mouths and biting and all that kind of stuff. I'm just going to observe that when you say that there's, it's society against society and it's no longer wars between armies, you're basically saying that there are no non-combatants. You're not saying that there is no distinction between civilian and soldier, combatant and non-combatant, which is kind of the way, Hamas and Hezbollah and the enemies of Israel have operated for a really long time. I just think it's interesting that the Columbia students are picking this guy as the guy they want to rename the library after and all that kind of stuff. So by and large, good. Now, the other thing we should point out is this is a good martini for now. Rounded up by the NYPD, arrested, take him away, charged him. Now, the question is going to be, will Alvin Bragg bother to prosecute any of them? Back in a year ago, Manhattan DA Alvin Bragg dropped the charges in 31 of the 46 cases of people who'd been arrested for occupying a Columbia building. Similar story over at City College. Now, I think that's outrageous and bad. But then I thought about it, Greg, and I realized Alvin Bragg's a busy man. He's got to focus on the real crimes, like falsifying your business records back in 2016 to conceal your payments to a porn star. That's the real crime that people in New York are worried about, not this, assaulting janitors and public property damage and things like that.
I love the idea of a Palestinian activist who died in 2017. Today is VE Day, or as Trump now calls it, Victory in World War II Day, although others would point out that the war continued till the end of the war in the Pacific. But
somewhere the Japanese Imperial Army, what do we, chop liver?
But that whole Palestinian activist who died in 2017, you could say, Adolf Hitler, he was an ambitious German politician who also enjoyed painting.
Austrian-born vegan artist who dabbled in politics dies. Sadly, it was a suicide. Not that sadly. Criticize Hitler all you want. He is the guy who killed Hitler.
Oh, man.
This episode got dark really fast. Hey.
It's not that dark when we're talking about Hitler often himself. But let's talk about your business. How's it doing? Better than Hitler's business about 80 years ago this time. At least I hope so. But you never know what factors are going to impact it. But there are ways to future-proof your business operations. And for more than 38,000 businesses, they've done just that with NetSuite by Oracle, the leading ERP platform. It integrates key business functions like accounting, financial management, inventory, and HR into one seamless system.
With a unified business management suite, NetSuite provides one source of truth. It gives you complete visibility and control, enabling quick, informed decisions based on real-time data. And closing your books in days instead of weeks means you spend less time on past reports and more time focusing on future growth. This efficiency lets you shift your attention from historical tasks to strategic initiatives that will drive your business forward.
Yeah, as those small business experts will tell you, you got to prioritize your time and use tools like NetSuite by Oracle to do the things that they can do for you. So if you need anything like that, get NetSuite by Oracle. And you can download the CFO's Guide to AI and Machine Learning at netsuite.com/martini. The guide is free to you at netsuite.com/martini. That's netsuite.com/martini. All right, Jim, on to our first officially crazy martini now. And for that, we turn to Bernie Sanders, the sometimes Democrat, but usually independent, meaning socialist senator from Vermont. He's been going around on private jets talking about the need to stand up to the billionaire oligarchs. And there's no better way to do that than chartering private jets. So Bernie was on with Bret Baier of the Fox News Channel last night, and Bret Baier asked him about that and whether there might be some hypocrisy involved. Bernie absolutely defending his use of private jets.
When you run a campaign and you do 3 or 4 or 5 rallies in a week, the only way you can get around to talk to 30,000 people. Think I'm going to be sitting on a waiting line at United waiting, 30,000 people are waiting? That's the only way you can get around. No apologies for that. That's what campaign travel is about. We've done it in the past. We're going to do it in the future.
Jim, it's just amazing how these hypocrites will continue to say this. We've got to cut back. We've got to restrict our usage of these things. But my work is so important that I, of course, am an exception to this rule.
So today in the corner, I wrote that I almost believe that this is hypocrisy raised to the level of an art form. I could be mad, but I'm almost impressed because you've got because if I said to somebody describe an oligarch, my guess is the first thing they would mention is flying around on private jets. Yes, traditionally the definition also means more like exercising political power and control over the government, which I guess, Bernie Sanders does that too. He's a senator. He doesn't sheepishly say, yeah, I have to do it. He's kind of defiant. He's a little angry that, Bret Baier would even bring this. And the first thing he says is, when's the last time you saw Donald Trump during a campaign mode at National Airport? Okay, but Bret Baier immediately is like, but it's not like Donald Trump is running around saying, I'm fighting the oligarchy, right? It's not like Donald Trump built his whole career on telling you rich people are bad and rich people are the cause of all your problems. And, I'm not like them. Bernie Sanders, as probably people know, has 3 homes. Net worth was estimated at $2 million. I'd love to see a bit more update on that. I have a feeling it's, maybe until the markets went down. But up until recently, he was doing pretty good. It's not just that he's like, yeah, I need to do this. He's like, what do you expect me to do? Wait on United? Yes! That's what every other human being who doesn't have access to a private jet, who needs to fly around. And he says, I posted this, and I got everybody, including John J. Harwood, to say, well, he's got a really busy schedule. Greg, do you think Bernie Sanders has any influence at all over the schedule of the Bernie Sanders Fighting the Oligarchy Tour? If Bernie Sanders says, you know what, we can't do that many events in that many cities, we're going to, no way, Senator Sanders, you have to do this. And he says, well, I can't expect 30,000 people to be waiting. Well, okay, but then do 1 rally a day. Why, we haven't even gotten into the carbon emissions. I mean, what does little Greta think of him right now? And by the way, I went back and I checked. Yes, he has praised little Greta for her denunciation of people and their carbon emissions. Greg, nothing you or I or 99% of our listeners out there will do anything to emit carbon as much as Bernie Sanders flights on that. Maybe Irving Schmidlap, because I think he's a pilot, does a lot of flying around, but I don't know if he flies private jet. I think he's a commercial pilot. But even so, even he's got lots of people on his plane. But Bernie Sanders does this, and it's this, how dare you question me? Of course I have to do this. My flying on a private jet, that's necessary. Everybody else's, that's selfish and wasteful and stuff like that. It's kind of perfect. If we didn't invent this, we would have to make it. You'd have to make it up. If you put the scene in a Chris Buckley novel, people would say it's over the top. And remember, Bernie Sanders thinks you have too many choices in sneakers and too many choices in deodorants. But he gets a private jet.
Yeah, no, exactly right. And how dare you is exactly how Greta Thunberg would react. How dare you? How dare you?
Yes. I mean, now she'd say, and down with Israel, kill the Jews, hooray for Hamas. That's her new cause. Teenagers, they're fickle. One day it's, we got to save the planet. The next day we got to drive the Jews into the sea. I've got 2 of them. That's just the way teenagers are.
2 quick follow-ups on this. If Bernie's private jets for me, but not for thee sounds familiar, there's a former climate czar who often says the same thing. Take a listen and see if this sounds somewhat familiar.
And I believe the time it takes me to get somewhere, I can't sail across the ocean. I have to fly to meet with people and get things done. But what I'm doing almost full time is working to win the battle of climate change. And in the end, if I offset and contribute my life to do this, I'm not going to be put on the defensive.
I think the global temperature would go down however much they want it to go down if he would just stop talking. But John Kerry might even be a bigger hypocrite, but Bernie's right there with him now, Jim.
You know, Greg, I thought this was going to end up with you citing Al Gore, who has a giant house and his electric bill was the biggest one in the state, and I thought we'd get you doing Al Gore. But instead we get John Kerry, which I like to think is one of my specialty impressions. And I would just point out, Greg, there are three kinds of jets. There's the private jets, which are, get me there the fastest and have the most luxurious. The second are the public, airline jets. And those, like, the plebes take those. Those, much slower. And I have to go through airport security. It's a real pain. The final group is the New York jets. And as we all know, those are the worst performing ones of all. So can't take those either.
I will say one thing about a politician who did not take private jets, and it actually benefited me one day, long time ago. I was flying from D.C. to Wisconsin for a friend's wedding. It was a Thursday night, and there was bad weather in between D.C. and Milwaukee, and Midwest Airlines at the time, doesn't exist anymore, kept saying, "Oh, we're still hopeful that we'll get you on tonight. We'll still get you on." And then all of a sudden I see Russ Feingold, the Wisconsin senator, walking to the podium. He talks to the gate agent for about 30 seconds, turns to his aide who's with him and says, "Okay, this isn't happening tonight." And so I then, because I didn't have a cell phone, raced to the phone to rebook for Midwest the next day and actually got a seat on the morning flight. And so I was ahead of the crowd because I was, eavesdropping on Russ Feingold. So, but because he flew commercial and didn't charter a plane, I actually got to where I needed to go. So that was a good day.
Greg, if we're sharing stories about prominent senators flying on commercial airlines, Strom Thurmond was once on one of my flights to South Carolina, flew coach, not first class, not business class, man of the people. Strom, had a chance to meet him. I gave him my business card. This is back when I was a cub reporter at Congressional Quarterly, and he did not use my business card to pick his teeth in front of me. He waited 5 minutes. No. So, God bless you, Strom Thurmond. Not a perfect man by any stretch of the imagination, but he was a man of the people, and he did not feel the need to be up in first class away from all the riffraff.
The extent that he probably made eye contact or seemed to make eye contact with you, there was probably a fairly good-looking young woman behind you.
Yes.
That was a big part of his reputation as well. So if he seemed really interested in your general direction, that could have been a factor.
Yeah, he was not. But he was cordial. I'll give him the opposite.
For those of you who are massive hypocrites on the climate issue and staying on private jets, maybe you just need a reality check. And for that, there's BetterHelp. This podcast today is sponsored by BetterHelp, and May is Mental Health Awareness Month. And mental health awareness is growing, but there's still progress to be made, because 26% of Americans who participated in a recent survey say they have avoided seeking mental health support due to fear of judgment. And so there's still this stigma that's out there. But if you're struggling with relationships or work or anything else going on in your life, maybe it's time to have an expert listen and suggest different ways to chart the path forward. And BetterHelp can help you do that.
BetterHelp has more than 10 years of experience matching people with the right therapist from their diverse network of more than 30,000 licensed therapists with a wide range of specialties. And BetterHelp is fully online, which helps make therapy affordable and convenient and serves more than 5 million people worldwide. And remember, you can easily switch therapists anytime at no extra cost.
We're all better with help. Visit betterhelp.com/3ML to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/3ML. Well, Jim, earlier when we were talking about Claire Shipman and her statement after the events at Columbia University, we talked about how she kept saying, "Let me be clear." You mentioned that Obama did that a lot. Another guy that has done that a lot is Joe Biden, the 46th president of the United States, who was on The View today, which means we have proof of life of Joe Biden. So that's good. A lot of different questions. But Sarah Haynes, first of all, fawning over Biden for his selfless decision to get out of the race, which is not how that went down at all. But then she talked about the difficulty of watching Trump defeat Kamala Harris. And so she basically asked for his analysis of why Harris lost. And listen to this tired old pablum.
Mr. President, last time you were here was a little over a month before the election, and you had made the selfless and very difficult decision, I'm sure, to step aside. And Democrats were feeling optimistic about the vice president's chances of winning the presidency. But then election night came, and it was like 2016 all over again. Yeah. So why do you think the vice president lost, and were you surprised?
I wasn't surprised, not because I didn't think the vice president was the most qualified person to be president. She is. She's qualified to be president of the United States of America. Right. But I was surprised. I wasn't surprised because they went the route of the sexist route, the whole route. I mean, this is a woman. She's this. She's that. I mean, it really. I've never seen quite as successful and a consistent campaign undercutting the notion that a woman couldn't lead the country and a woman of mixed race.
Yeah.
The main personal attack I remember is just her vapid answers, and she giggled all the time. The main attacks against her were the fact that she was the inheritor of the Biden record, and the fact that she kept trying to change the positions that she held on some pretty radical views.
So first of all, I suppose I should say a little bit of a mea culpa, because I had my doubts that we would ever hear from Joe Biden again. It was a long stretch where he made no public appearances. He did one speech at the Model UN conference up in New York City. There was zero press coverage. I mean, the Biden team did not want any press coverage of his first remarks to the public since leaving the presidency. But he did do a television appearance, and boy, he subjected himself to all those hard-hitting questions from The View. Wow, that's that. You know you're going to get a hard time with that one. That's right up there with Meet the Press and all that stuff. Ooh, Unsurprisingly, it's not great. He didn't look great. Doesn't sound great. I noticed Jill was with him, which I like. Remember when Kamala Harris had to do her first interview with Tim Walz, and everybody was like, "Really? That's you needed him around." By the way, in retrospect of the election, even more this is not the weakest link where you can phone a friend. And if you're going to phone a friend, don't phone Tim Walz. There is no spin out from this. To paraphrase from a forthcoming column. So I finally finished the Jonathan Allen, Amy Parnes book, Fight. Lots of anecdotes, all of the now it can be told story. There are three anecdotes that jump out to me, just kind of indicating how, the Dagwood sandwich of bad decisions that Democrats had here. First of all, Biden has a really bad debate. He's meeting with Democratic governors, and he assures them, don't worry, I'm not going to do any more events after 8 p.m. for the remainder of the campaign. Shockingly, this is not reassuring to the Democratic governors, one of whom apparently said afterwards, well, just tell the Chinese when not to invade, because I don't want to wake them up, in the middle of the night. The idea that I'm a perfectly good president, I just can't work after 8 is not going to, remember Hillary Clinton and the 3 a.m. phone call ads? So Biden is running around saying, I can't do late nights anymore. And he's still running for a second term. Then, during that time period when there was all this pressure, is he going to stay on the ticket? Is he going to step down? The Biden team was calling up Democratic donors who were upset, who were complaining, who were panicking. And they said to them, do you want Kamala Harris? You know Kamala Harris is going to be a disaster. You know she can't win. Nobody wants her. So stop complaining. And I said, so you have the staff of the president calling up donors in their own party and trashing the vice president, saying that she's an absolute liability and disaster waiting to happen. Now, if you're an absolute disaster and liability waiting to happen, first, you really shouldn't be vice president. Right?
Right.
Joe Biden could have had a heart attack at any given moment, right? Or God forbid, some assassin. Presidents die. It's a really unfortunate factor in American history. So she's supposed to be, as they say, a heartbeat away from the presidency and ready to step in at a moment's notice. And, God forbid there's a Cuban Missile Crisis or something where you got to have a really sharp-minded president making difficult life and death decisions. And the president's team is saying, look, she can't handle this. She's totally not ready for the job. That's why he's got to stay in there, even though he did a disaster in the debate. And nobody, but it apparently never crossed anyone's mind, should we be doing this? Could this backfire on us in any way? Is it bad that we're running around telling people the vice president can't handle the job? Third example, because you're like, Biden's a mess, Harris is a mess. If you're wondering about Tim Walz, we'd all seen the first moment of the debate when Tim Walz looked into the camera and he just had this utter terror in his eyes. Elmer Fudd every time he stepped on a bear trap or something like that. Well, apparently, he wasn't sleeping for weeks ahead of the debate, and his staff was he was seriously nervous. And so, apparently all of that nervousness came out. He had all of these attack lines he was trying to memorize to get in there. Remember, J.D. Vance came out and he was a Care Bear. He was the powder puff, just nicest guy in the world. And Vance was just yeah, hey, this is a pretty good guy. Apparently, and here's the thing. When you're vice president, you're a heartbeat away from the presidency. You could end up being commander-in-chief, in a New York minute, as they say. I'm sure debating J.D. Vance has its challenges, but being vice president is going to have tougher. And if you can't handle a debate with J.D. Vance, and if that thing is like turns you into a nervous wreck, you're really not going to be able to handle the duties of the vice presidency or the presidency. And it's a really reassuring to know Tim Walz is nowhere. Oh, Minnesota, sorry, you're screwed. There's no, I can't help you there. But at least he's not in the executive branch of the federal government right now.
Well, that's certainly reassuring. And it's almost coming full circle, Jim, because the question of why did Kamala Harris lose, actually, you can trace it right back to the very same desk at The View last October with this question.
Well, if anything, would you have done something differently than President Biden during the past 4 years?
There is not a thing that comes to mind in terms of, and I've been a part of most of the decisions that have had impact.
It's not like Biden can go on there and say, yeah, she should have just denounced everything we did. But
terrible answer. What was she doing? I'm an anvil who's dragging her down, man. No. By the way, also according to that book by Allen and Parnes, apparently that was not, shockingly, that's not the answer she was supposed to give. They anticipated it, and they wanted her to give some version of, this election is not about the future, it's not about the past, I'm not thinking about things I would do differently, I'm thinking, like, that would have been a great answer, but at least it probably would have done more deliberate damage to it. And that, the answer of, nothing comes to mind, like, apparently even Harris's own staff was like, that was not the plan.
Yeah, when Sonny Hostin causes the most damage potentially to your campaign, that means you got a pretty bad campaign going. But anyway, Biden is alive, and he's still living in denial. Jim, have a good day. See you tomorrow.
Biden's alive, and the Democratic Party's dead. See you Monday, Greg.
Jim Garrity, National Review. I'm Greg Corombos of Radio America. Thanks so much for being with us today. And don't forget that tomorrow will be our 3 Martini special on underreported stories so far in 2025. In the meantime, please subscribe to the 3 Martini Lunch if you don't already. Tell your friends about us as well. Thanks for your 5-star ratings and your kind reviews. Please keep those coming. Get us on your home devices. All you have to say is play 3 Martini Lunch podcast. Follow us both on X. He's at Jim Garrity. I'm at Greg Corombos. Have a terrific Thursday, and please join us again Friday for the next 3 Martini Lunch.